Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekdays at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay or Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Listen on demand wherever you get your podcasts or watch us live on YouTube.
And Selzer, the Young Turks will say, invented the business, and she changed the national dialogue this week. And thank you so much for joining us. Full disclosure, folks, I worked with Ann years ago with Bloomberg News, so I just want to get that out of the way. And how has polling changed with the advent of the cell phone?
Well, first, let me say that the industry was invented by George Gallup, who grew up in Jefferson, Iowa. So the Iowa lineage is strong, I'll give you that. The question about cell phones, we didn't really need to dial cell phones until 2008, but now they are a routine part of our practice. That is, we draw a random sample of cell phone numbers and of landline numbers, and it's as easy as it ever once was with cell phones.
Paul Sweeney and I compare our phones. Paul got 14 calls this weekend. I got 10 calls this weekend. We're not answering the phone. How do you account for that in Iowa as you say Harris could win?
You know, what I like to say is for every one of you, Tom, that is not answering your phone, there's a doppelganger who does answer their phone, and they reflect what it is that you would if you talk to us. You know, I'm kind of teasing there. We have a response rate that is better than the national average. What it says on your phone is unknown caller. So it doesn't say possible spam. It doesn't do anything that might tip you off. And if you do answer, the first thing that you hear the interviewer say is that they're calling from the Iowa poll. And I think I give that great credit for our ability to get a good cross-section of Iowans.
And talk to us about your latest poll. What's it tell you these days?
Well, it was a shock, believe you me. When I went into the office after the first night of interviewing, no one would expect that Kamala Harris would have leapfrogged over Donald Trump into the lead. We had seen her move in the September poll from where we were measuring Joe Biden as the nominee back in June. And this is really just a continuation of that. She now leads by 3 points, I think. 47-44, right?
So what's driving this strength for Vice President Harris?
It's a continuation of what we saw in September, which is the difference between June and September were more people, dramatically more people, saying that they were likely to vote. That measurement would be, I'm going to definitely vote. If you just say probably, we don't count that. And that increase accounted for Kamala Harris's bump. So less than 1% of people went for Donald Trump when 13% went for Kamala Harris. And that was the difference between June. It was an 18-point gap in June, a 4-point gap in September. That continues with our October poll, in that the demographics more likely than average to say they will definitely vote or that they've already voted are strong Harris demographics. It's women, it's college educated, it's younger people, it's older people as well. The incidence of voting, if you're age 64 and over, is like 94%. That's a really big number, and she does very well with older Iowans. In fact, she wins by 20 points with Iowa women, and just 14 go for Trump. The margin is 14 for Trump.
If you're joining
One thing to be crystal clear about the importance of older people is older women. Her ratio of win in women age 65 and over is 2-to-1.
Interesting.
That's a huge part of her success.
And Selzer with us, folks, of course, iconic with the Des Moines Register and now on her own. She is the pollster that the pollsters study in terms of accuracy in all. We're thrilled to have her here. Bob Woodward with us later in the hour. And Selzer, I want to go on. I mean, I get Des Moines and all that, and Ames. Okay, fine. Chickasaw County. I'm 2 counties in from the Minnesota border. It shows all of the political turmoil that Bob Woodward's written about for pushing 50 years here, Barack Obama, and then a huge swing to Trump. What did you learn in your polling about the Chickasaw counties of Iowa?
Well, the Chickasaw counties in northwest Iowa, that's Trump territory. It's just that the margins aren't quite as big. I don't have data down to the county level. I wish somebody would pay me enough money that I could do that. But
so I work on that, okay?
We can look at congressional districts, and this is really fascinating. The first congressional district, which is now southeast Iowa, so it includes Davenport and counties south of that. It also includes Johnson County, which is the University of Iowa. And Marionette Miller Meeks is the incumbent. All of our congressional representatives are Republican. She won narrowly, like by 6 or 8 votes the last time. She's being challenged by a University of Iowa professor. And the talk about abortion has been the critical element of this campaign. The Democrat is leading the incumbent Republican by 20 percentage points. Wow. So Iowa has a 6-week ban on abortion that went into effect this summer. And I think that that's responsible for the big gender gap with women. And I think that's also why Democrats may be doing better this time.
And just from a historical perspective, how representative is Iowa for the overall United States here as you think about your polls and the work you see?
Well, if you're asking me to extrapolate, if it's happening in Iowa, is it happening in Wisconsin, which is people make the assumption that we're very similar. I have made the argument that they're not that similar. Iowa has had a very strong Republican Party that recruited good candidates, got good candidates elected, such that there is only one Democrat elected at the statewide level. And all of our Washington delegation is Republican. Both houses in the state house are Republican, and not by small margins. That's not the same way in Wisconsin. Right. It's a little more mixed there. So I think what Iowa, if it is representative, it is that there is more going on under the surface in terms of the abortion issue, in terms of perhaps Trump fatigue, that is turning this state that no one expected would shift blue into a state that might.
And Selzer, the President Trump went after you this weekend after he didn't like your poll. I believe there was a period long ago where you did a poll that favored Trump, and he loved you then as well. I want you to speak to people like Lisa Mateo, Michael Barr, Paul Sweeney, Tom Keene, exhausted by the single point certitude of your racket. When you look at the modern day cacophony of polling, the disrespect or throw aside of margin of error, how does Ann Selzer react?
Well, keep in mind, the margin of error works both ways. So if you want to say that the race could be closer than the numbers reflect, the race could also be equally likely a wider margin for the winner. And people forget that, and it's as though they want it to be close. We say that our best estimate is exactly what the numbers say, and any other estimate, like, well, it's a virtual tie, is an inferior estimate, and that just the highest probability of what's true are the actual numbers that we get. So I get a little, it's a point here, it's a point there, and people are wanting to make meaningful statements about that. I think that's been exhausting in terms of the other polls. So that my poll was not 1 point, and that my poll, now is the leapfrog for Harris. I think people are wondering if it's a canary in a coal mine, and that other states might be seeing similar things happening, but the methods of those pollsters might not allow them to see it.
Paul, get this question in. A listener just emailed in on tariffs.
And curious if tariffs are having an impact on this poll. I'm not sure farmers like tariffs.
Well, when Trump instituted the tariffs, there was concern about it, but he was able to pull some money out of a different part of the budget and reimburse farmers for money that they had lost. So they ended up okay. I don't know that they're eager and excited to go back into a tariff war because Iowa produces so much in the agriculture sector that it has to have foreign partners, foreign markets for export. And that's been the case since Khrushchev came to Iowa to learn how to do what Iowa does with agriculture. This is back in the 1950s. Wow. So they rely on foreign trade. I think they're probably nervous about it. When we tested tariffs back when they were in force under Trump, the farmers and the rural areas were going along with it. They liked their president. They're going to support him.
Yeah, and we got to leave it there. Of course, I remember your work on Eisenhower Stevenson in the early 50s before Khrushchev showed up in Iowa. She is Ann Selzer. She changed the political dialogue this weekend across the nation. Huge response on YouTube from Republicans and Democrats to her work. Ann Selzer of Iowa.
You're listening to the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Catch us live weekday afternoons from 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern. Listen on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. Or watch us live on YouTube.
The Tots are losing to Aston Villa. I mean, they're just not getting it done.
All right.
And they take Son, the Korean, out. Tots fire it up and crush, I say crush, Jordan Rochester's Aston Villa. I thought he'd cancel on us. Joining us now from Queen Victoria Street, Jordan Rochester with Mizuho, looking at the broader perspective, but of course also his charm on fixed income. Jordan, you're sitting with Dominic Constant and Steve Risciuto. How do you play the election? Where's the Jordan Rochester opportunity?
Well, it's clear to me, Tom, what to do in the next 24 to 36 hours, which is whatever the Trump trades were, do the opposite. And Friday was really painful after NFP because we got a bit of a mess. But broadly speaking, for most of last week and so far today, we're seeing the dollar lower, we're seeing rates rally, the curve flatten, and we're seeing the probability of Trump soften. That wasn't based on the view that Trump's not going to win. It's just what I call the pre-event trade coming to an end, which is we've had this build-up of Trump's odds. We've had a very strong run in the dollar, thanks to the macro as well. But people are going to lighten up into the event risk. They want to take profit and be ready to react because it truly is 50-50. I lean towards saying, Tom, the macro will still say buy the dollar, whoever wins. But we're going to have that knee-jerk dollar lower if Harris wins for you to take advantage of it, or you're going to miss it if Trump wins. Now,
well, Mizuho,
carry on. Sorry, Tom.
Synthesize, Jordan, this is important. Synthesize what Constant is doing in Risciuto over in New York with what you're doing with London. Does that set you up for dollar resiliency and a higher interest rate regime?
Well, I think with what Steve Risciuto has been talking about, the US is really on fire in terms of growth, where things are with the labor market compared to Europe and peers. So that's why I think we're going to have a divergent monetary policy story. Maybe the Fed's not going to be raising rates, that's a bit too far of a stretch, but they won't be cutting rates as much as Europe needs to and will do. The UK is kind of in between. So that's naturally dollar bullish. You just then have these tariff policies by Trump versus non-tariff policies by Harris that really widens up to where we get to. So if you have a Trump victory, you're looking at 103 in euro dollar. That's a big swing from where we are now by year end. Or if Harris wins, you're going to see euro dollar back to 112. Wow. So there's this huge binary outcome that the two sort of candidates will lead to. But then once we get to those equilibrium points, so let's say December, I think next year is still going to be about US outperforming, even if Harris wins.
So Jordan, running the fixed income, commodities, and currencies, what are your clients across those asset classes? Are they hedging themselves going into tomorrow, or are they just taking the longer term, saying, I'm not too worried about the near term political? How are they playing it? I think
everyone's worried about the near term political because of that gap risk. And I think a lot of people don't want to ruin their year-to-date P&Ls as well. We're just a month or so away from getting to that period where you lock in for the annual reports. So you're seeing a lot of people de-risk, you're seeing a lot of people uncertain, a lot of people saying the words, I don't have an edge in this, the pollsters don't know what it's going to be, the sort of modelers like Nate Silver don't really know what it's going to be, everything says 50-50. So you're seeing a lightening up the risk, you're seeing business activity slow down, you're seeing volumes slow down. I think that today's one of the quieter days so far in the past week or two. But then everyone's ready to gear up once you know the outcome, because it is an event that's difficult to predict, but still, I think, very tradable after we know who's in the White House.
So the dollar, though, I mean, go out 6-12 months. Is there a bear case for this U.S. dollar in your mind?
There really is. There is a bear case, and it's one that a few charts say it's there, it's live, which is when the Fed got really dovish on 50 basis points, it's if those impulses come back. And one of the charts that really screams that we've got a problem is the Conference Board's consumer confidence, which asks the question, are jobs plentiful or are they hard to get? And if you plot that versus the United States unemployment rate, it is amazing at predicting where the big turns are, going all the way back, I think, to the 70s. And right now it says that unemployment should be on a 5 handle. Now, COVID's ruined many good charts, and we know unemployment is not on a 5 handle, it's 4.1. So we are far from where that signal is. Is that signal wrong, or is it right, and we've just been staring at it for a while and ignoring it? I think the signal might be wrong. I think this time around, the fiscal impulse in the US and all of the COVID charts that have come to a silent death, I think this might be another one to add on top of that pile. But I might be wrong, and the Conference Board is screaming there's a problem, and that leads to the US outperformance changing, Fed cutting by more than what's expected.
So what do you think we're going to hear from the Fed this coming Thursday?
I feel like the Fed and maybe the Bank of England as well, if they could, they'd hide under the bed sheets to just get through this week, because it's pretty difficult for policymakers. You've got the Fed, who's got to have questions about, what does the change in politics mean for their outcome, their outlook. They're going to say it doesn't matter. It does matter if you have tariffs with Trump, and it does matter if you have large fiscal. And I think back to 2016, we were at a very tepid stage of the hiking cycle, and when Trump got in, we did see an acceleration in rate hikes. So it could be the case that if Trump gets in, these cuts that we're seeing from the Fed, I think we'll see a 25 basis point cut. There may be doubts about whether they go ahead in December or January. That's kind of where we're at.
Excuse me, Jordan. You're with Mizuho, which means I have to ask about Japan. Is Japan tradable, or is there so much uncertainty, including with the LDP challenges politically, that you can't get a visibility on yen out to the end of Q1 2025?
I think it's very tradable. The politics has been very surprising. Essentially what we've seen is the LDP stronghold on Japanese politics has weakened. They're quite likely to be either in a minority government or in a coalition agreement with other parties. And we still don't know the outcome of that. The 26th of November is when an outcome needs to be determined. There'll have to be a vote in Parliament to say if we're going ahead or not. I think what could happen is we might have a coalition partner that leads to more dovish policies on the BOJ, might lead to less hawkishness on the yen, and it might lead to more fiscal spending. So that just all spells dollar yen higher. The main problem with the politics, though, humans can be flippant, Tom, and if we get to 160 in dollar yen, do we see FX intervention again? That's when it becomes really untradeable, because who wants to take the other side of the MOF? But I think for the time being, dollar yen high is easier if Trump wins. When we get to that 160 level, we'll have to have a scratch and think, are we going to have intervention here? I think no. Given the political uncertainty.
Very quickly here, link it into gold. I mean, I know that's off your remit, but if I get a 160 yen, what does that do to gold in the Pacific Rim?
Well, it's the same story. Gold's been one of the largest outperformers this year because of the situation with sanctions risks and tariffs. It's detached from real yields in the US. It used to be perfectly correlated for most part. If real yields and dollar and gold split, who's the buyer? And the buyer's been central banks. I think it's something that we're going to see faded, so gold suffers if Trump doesn't win. But it's something that will definitely be a long-term story as central banks are clearly the buyers here, trying to avoid potential sanctions down the line.
Jordan, I got 20 seconds. Does Tottenham top 5 team this year?
No, Aston Villa is. This was just a blip. Even though we lost 4-0 against them last year at home, which I went to that game and decided not to go to yesterday's game for a good reason. What a screamer by Tottenham, I've got to say.
Obligatory soccer talk. We had to do that for New York City after the marathon. Jordan Rochester with Mizuho. Thank you so much. Greatly appreciated.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also listen live on Amazon Alexa from our flagship New York station. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130.
Joining us now on this election eve, Bob Woodward. It's 400 pages. The book is War. He's done many, many interviews on it. It is an insight into the Biden administration. I love what Robert Gates has said, who's served both political persuasions. On Woodward, he has an extraordinary ability to get otherwise responsible adults to spill their guts to him. Bob Woodward joins us on election eve. Bob, this weekend I discovered someone in the Keene household who had not seen All the President's Men. I tried to explain to them that I was interviewing Robert Redford on Monday. In that movie, you show up with Mr. Cady in the courtroom and you say, my name's Bob Woodward, I'm from the Post, and I wanted to ask you how you happened to come on this case. The rudeness and direction of Redford's questions is appalling. It's shocking. Where did you learn to ask questions so abrupt, so direct, so as Robert Gates would say, they all spill their guts? Where did you learn that skill?
Well, look, that morning I got called to the courthouse. This was the morning of the Watergate burglary. I'd been covering night police for 9 months. And I go to the courthouse and in come these burglars dressed in business suits. I had never seen a burglar in a business suit. I'd never seen a well-dressed burglar. And the lead burglar announced reluctantly to the judge that he'd worked at the CIA.
Yeah.
And what? CIA?
Right.
Business suits? 5 burglars?
Right.
I mean, it was just like, oh, how do you not follow this story? And
right.
That's what I did.
I want to drive the conversation forward, Bob, on this election eve for a nation, some would say, fighting with its concept of democracy. In the epilogue to War, you have a brilliant 2 sentences. Often I have said, only half jokingly, that when I wake up in the morning, my first thought is, quote, what are the bastards hiding, unquote. So let's get 2 answers. What is Mr. Trump hiding this morning?
Well, Trump is making very clear who he is, and it's so visible. Let me just give you an example. I'm sorry, this may sound a little boring, but it's right at the heart of your question. The people Trump, when he was president, chose to be close to him, people who'd spent their lives defending our country. And let's look at what these people that Trump picked for key positions say about Trump now. Former Chief of Staff John Kelly, one of the most respected people in the military. This was Trump's selection to be the chief of staff at the White House. Kelly says of Trump, he's an idiot. It's pointless to try to convince him of anything. He's gone off the rails. We're in crazy town.
Bob, let me ask also, to your wonderful quote, what are the bastards hiding? What is Vice President Harris hiding into this election?
Well, I think there are actually things that we don't know enough about. I had some time to work on how she deals with lots of issues, and it's very let me get the right selection here, because she is tough. She is the person who goes and has meeting with Netanyahu, which I got the notes of, and really this was July 25th of this year, just a couple of months ago, and she could not be tougher with Netanyahu. And the notes show her saying the following in a closed meeting with Bibi Netanyahu. I'm disturbed by the humanitarian situation in Gaza. People are starving. There are 4,000 people per toilet. She really gets on him about this. And then she goes out in public and doesn't pull any punches and says, we cannot look away and become numb about what is happening in Gaza. And I will not be silent. I'm sorry. Yep. I'm giving a long answer.
No, it's excellent. Bob, stepping away here as we think about this election here, I can't help but wonder, thinking about your work, your earliest work back at the Washington Post, what has become of the GOP party? It seems like it is now clearly the party of one former president, Donald Trump. Is that the new GOP going forward?
Well, it is at the moment. We'll see. I know lots of Republicans, and I know some who will say kind of public, I support Trump. I like Trump because he's the force in the party. But privately, it's thumbs down. They don't like Trump. Look, who is Trump? This is the question that people need to answer. He doesn't like advice. He doesn't like democracy, doesn't like the Constitution, doesn't like truth.
Joining us, Bob Woodward. We will continue with Mr. Woodward. We say good morning to all of you across the nation on this election eve. Under 400 pages, War by Bob Woodward is simply a look into the Biden administration, framed by Netanyahu and Putin, Zelensky, and of course, Vice President Harris. War. It's been out some time now. Paul Sweeney, pick it up with Bob Woodward, please.
Bob, tomorrow, obviously Election Day. What will you be focusing on? Is it a state? Is it a certain candidate? Is it an issue? What are you going to be focusing on going into?
Well, I need to look at what happens, and all the polls say it's razor thin. So who knows? I hope and that people will look at the candidates, particularly. He was president for 4 years. He has said some things in this campaign that really, and he really shows what's at stake in this election. He is a danger to democracy. Right. He is a danger to the United States. Why? Go back. My first interview with him was 35 years ago when he was a real estate king in New York City. And then, and even in interviews I did in the Oval Office with him when he was president, he's driven by instinct. He's got this idea that his instincts, what his gut feel is perfect. That's the way to go.
Yeah, Bob,
you can't run a government on anyone's instincts. You need a team. You need some alternative views. And Trump is locked, as we know, locked into himself.
For the nation on this election eve, Bob Woodward joins us, of course, forever with the Washington Post. Bob, I had to do something for the youngest afterthought a while back. I had to look at her Vietnam paper and that. And like a lot of us, you were in NROTC at Yale, and I was doing another act out at the time at Boulder. I completely avoided reading or thinking about Vietnam, and I enjoyed Max Hastings, you know him well, from the Telegraph, and his one volume on Vietnam as well. The crucible of the modern Democratic Party is McGovern and HHH in 1972. The legacy that Vice President Harris...
HHS being Hubert Humphrey.
Hubert Humphrey, thank you. But the legacy that Harris carries forward, do you see her as a change agent for Democratic Party theology? Or is it, as the critics would say, Obama version 4?
Well, look, she's tough. She's going to president's school. She's very lucky, and in a sense, the country is very lucky that Biden, who was vice president once himself and didn't like to be cut out of things, he's made sure that she really is getting a graduate course in the presidency. She's at the meetings, the discussions, the debates. There are lots of signs of two qualities: independence and determination. And I think that that is a good thing. That's not a political judgment. It is what I was able to do in the reporting about what her course of going to president's school is. She's got a national security advisor named Phil Gordon, who is really experienced.
Right.
Really goes back a long time into the White House and the State Department and brings a lot of knowledge. Who's Donald Trump's national security advisor? His mouth. He will say whatever he wants, whatever springs in. That is the danger we face.
Bob Woodward, one final question. The dedication for my lifelong friend and reporting partner, Carl Bernstein. Do you guys talk a lot? Like, is there a Bernstein-Woodward take on where this nation is going right now?
Well, we do talk all the time, 3-4 times a week for sure. We saw each other recently. We did an appearance together just a few days ago in New York City. The question here is, who's Trump? Who's Harris? One important credential that Harris has is that Secretary of Defense Austin has a lot of respect for her. I describe new scenes in the book about what Austin has done and how he's been very tough with the Russian Defense Minister Shoigu, and there's some transcripts I have that are in the book, and you can see exactly what they said to each other. So there's hope, but to be a president and deal with this world situation now would stretch anyone, would stretch Dwight Eisenhower, would stretch. It is a very dangerous time. We got to get it right, and we got to be careful. And Trump is not a manager. Trump is not a person who really understands what the national interest is, because there is a blockage, and that blockage is he only cares about himself. On this election eve, we continue with Bob Woodward. A few more minutes with Mr. Woodward in celebration of his book War and the 20 books or so before that as well. We welcome all of you across this nation on Apple CarPlay, Android Auto, and of course this new technology, YouTube. Paul, there was no YouTube.
No, there was not.
When the Watergate thing was going on.
No, exactly. Hey, Bob, if former President Trump were to lose this election, is there an heir apparent? Does Trumpism remain a political force? Is a J.D. Vance or someone like that out there in the wings? I mean, that's that's speculation. I don't know. What is very interesting is to listen to Trump in the last couple of days. He's in a very sour mood, and I think it was yesterday or the day before, he said, I mean, this is the man who wants to be president again. He's very dark, very profane comments. And he said, this is a crooked country. Now imagine somebody, this is not a crooked country. Right. It may become one if he becomes president. Bob Woodward, I got to ask one final question, and this is immense respect. And, we get a huge response. Republicans hate you. Democrats love you. I get it, folks.
Bob Woodward with
No, that's just not. I know lots of Republicans who don't march in line with Trump.
Well, I'm running out of time, Bob Woodward, but I got one final question with great respect for your career. Should newspapers endorse presidents?
Well, that's obviously up to them. At the Washington Post, there's a big controversy about the non-endorsement now. The Washington Post, I know very well for over 52 years, as I say, it's strong when the reporting is strong, as it has been now. I think it's been magnificent. And the editorial page should deal with the strength of that reporting. The editorial page needs to deal with reality, and the reporting is real and incredibly strong. To ignore it is to ignore reality. Not a good thing for any institution.
Right. Bob, thank you so much. Bob Woodward on this election eve across the nation, of course, forever with the Washington Post. The book is War.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast. Listen live each weekday starting at 7 a.m. Eastern on Apple CarPlay and Android Auto with the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.
Your daily look at the front page is the Lisa Mateo Hour. Lisa, go.
I know. I forgot how to do this already. It's been too long. But since we're talking so much about election, I figure I'd start here. This is in the Washington Post. It's saying this shift from election day to election season now because more people are casting the vote early. So they see the difference. Quick number check. More than 74 million people have already cast their ballots as of Saturday. And that's nearly 47% the total number cast in the 2020 presidential election. So a lot of people doing it. So the experts are saying it's more election day has become this more like end to voting rather than kind of the kickoff.
What's your earliest memory of going your parents and going?
Definitely going into the polls with my parents back in the day. I'm sure my dad just went down the Republican side, right down the thing. That's what he probably did.
My father would pick me up, and I got to pretend I was closing the handle thing.
Yep.
And then you'd watch him click, 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 and maybe you could do one click.
Yep.
That's what I used to do with my kids. Yeah.
I think with technology, we should know, by 8 o'clock tonight, why we're doing write-in votes. I have no idea, which I did, by the way. I mailed it in and did all that kind of silliness.
Did you vote for Taylor Swift?
Yeah, T. Swift, the write-in. But I just think there's no technology in the whole entire process.
My problem is, where is my relationship with my kids, or frankly with the dogs, if I'm doing a stupid write-in ballot sterilized in the kitchen with a martini in my hand?
Yeah, exactly.
That's not the way we did it.
No.
We're removed from it, Lisa.
Yeah, and it kind of reminds me of how Black Friday used to be this big thing, and then now it's become
We'll talk to Bob Woodward of the Washington Post
he'll
about
help
this.
us figure it
What
out.
do you got, Lisa?
Yeah. Okay. So why your grocery bill is becoming so expensive. This is from the Wall Street Journal. It really breaks it down because it goes to the distributors, and they're saying that's the main reason, because you have the food companies who are saying higher costs, higher ingredient costs, labor costs. But the companies, a lot of the smaller food companies are saying that it's the distributors, the ones that take the products from the store, from the food makers, they bring it to the store, they sell it, and they ship them. And they charge a lot of these extra fees, like a fee for launching a new flavor, a fee for getting a promotion at retail, a fee for if they supply too much product and it goes bad. There's a spoilage fee that they charge. So a lot of these smaller food companies are saying they're stretched, they don't know what to do, because this is and what they have to do is raise the prices, and that's the reason for it. It's the distributors that are the issue.
Well, the food makers had some nice profits over the last several years because they told you right up front in their quarterly earnings, we're able to raise prices. The Procter & Gamble's of the world, the Coca-Cola's were able to raise prices, and because our costs went up, but the wholesalers, I didn't even think about that. Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, private label sales hit record in 2023.
We do a lot more private label than we ever did before.
Yeah.
A ton
You
more.
wonder where that'll be in 3, 4, 5 years. Very good. Next, Lisa.
Okay,
please,
so
please.
if you want to learn to talk like a banker, there are a lot of terms you need to
I saw
know.
this.
And this was in Business Insider. Finance speak, Wall Street lingo. So they asked a couple industry insiders who came up with this list of words. So they said, for example, bake-off.
Bake-off,
Has
love it.
nothing to do with
Paul
flour or
Sweeney
eggs.
has been in so many bake-offs.
Bake-offs, exactly right. And
Yes.
if one of my clients had a bake-off, I'd be very upset. No. This is my business. You're my business. We're not opening up to competition. Who was here calling on you every month for the last 5 years?
So bake-off. There you
That
go.
happens.
Didn't know. They compete to do this, like chosen as an advisor by a client. Color is another one.
Yep, I
We're not
learned
talking
that
about
early
pink
on.
or blue. It's this one.
Frank Gehry.
Oh, okay. So it's often used when bankers are asking for more of something, like, I want more color from you. Tell me more,
More
basically.
information, yep.
More information.
More
More
detail,
information.
yep.
So that's color. Boil the ocean. Have you heard
Nope,
that one?
nope.
Boil the ocean. Okay, because you can't actually boil the ocean, right? So it basically means someone doing a little bit too much or making something more complicated than it has to be. So no, you're boiling the ocean. Like just break it down. You're being too complicated. So it has a lot of these different terms that are they're pretty cool. So they want, if you want to be in the loop.
Okay.
So that's what these are.
I used to be in the loop.
You used to be.
I used to be in the
but you
loop.
still know these,
Okay.
the Bake Off. There you go.
You were 6'5" trust fund.
I still have a whole room full of, or desk full of Lucite's. Which
Oh, do you have Lucite's?
Yeah, I got
Lucite's?
about 120 of them.
Yeah. They still do Lucite's?
I don't know because they don't do. I mean, I just saw an old Wall Street Journal line around that had the tombstone in the work. I mean, that's the first thing you went to in section C to see if your deal's tombstone made into
tombstone and how big it was.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
It was just like variety. And,
Yep,
and all
exactly.
That. You got anything else? You got
Last
more?
one. Yes, the
One more.
future of footwear is spray-on sneakers.
Come on.
Not sure if anyone in the marathon wore these for 26 2-point miles, but it's a Swiss sneaker maker brand. It's called On. So it made with spray. So basically, it's this new technology. It sprays the upper part of the sneaker onto this foot mold, and it's done by a robotic arm. Okay, so the whole idea behind it is that you don't need to stitch it. It takes 3 minutes to make the shoe, and it could be the step toward automating an industry because the sneaker industry is very labor intensive.
Right.
So it could be a change to the sneaker making industry. They cost you about $300 each, but now they're trying to bring the cheaper options in. But as they start to get this technology going, don't know, it's supposed to fit like a sock. Don't know the support level or anything, but a spray-on sneaker. I don't know.
I don't even know where to begin with this other than I sat transfixed on a bed in Cape Cod at 2 a.m. one night, and there was a new Lisa Mateo, thank you so much for the newspapers. Are we doing this tomorrow? Special election day coverage? Lisa Mateo
I don't know.
newspapers?
I
have to
don't
do
know.
that tomorrow.
Might be
It's
canceled.
a game day decision.
Lisa Mateo, thanks so much.
This is the Bloomberg Surveillance Podcast, available on Apple, Spotify, and anywhere else you get your podcasts. Listen live each weekday 7 to 10 a.m. Eastern on Bloomberg.com, the iHeartRadio app, TuneIn, and the Bloomberg Business app. You can also watch us live every weekday on YouTube and always on the Bloomberg Terminal.